Now that I've got this crate power block apart to fix it, let's take a tour around and look at its parts. This is a pretty good example, although it's a few years old, of a Class D power amplifier, audio power amplifier, with a switched power supply, which makes it very compact. I mean, look how small it is. Very compact and light for the 150 watts it puts out. It can have two 150 watt outputs, two 75 watt outputs, or with a button here on the back, you can bridge them together and get 100.5. Well, the chip, we'll get that in a minute, but the chip actually says it will do 100, but of course that's under ideal circumstances. Okay, over on this side, we have a flyback mode switched power supply, and this is the main integrated IC that makes life a lot easier. It's all in one. This area here is some of the feedback regulation area, and there's the op amp that divides this side from the line. Back here we see the line power supply. This is the input filter. It uses a standard IDEC power cord. And the rectifier under here, hash filter, the main filter cap that will have, I don't know, 140, 50 volts on it normally. And hiding under here through these two screws are bolted down to this massive heat sink. Those two screw holes you see in the center there are the two 25 volt regulators. These are actually linear regulators that run all the low level stuff. Let's see. In the back here is your inputs and your outputs. They're pretty much the standard. Well, there's a actual XLR jack down there. That's the line out like you see with most of this kind of gear. And it has some phono inputs too, which are kind of handy, I guess, if you're using this for a PA amplifier. But most of the ins and outs are quarter-inch phone jacks like you find on most instrument amplifier gear. And here's the some chokes and line conditioners and input drivers, and there's actually some filtering back in here too. That's nice. And so, and this board right here, these are the inductors and capacitors that's necessary with a Class D amplifier. And the amplifier chip is actually that little guy right there on the back. Yep, that's, well, if you go straight by the build sheet, it's 200 watts max. I mean the part sheet. And this little deal here is it was the output in the bridged output block with some, I guess these are protection resistors, inline resistors of some sort. I'm not exactly sure. I'm surprised at some things like how small this wire is here, considering it might carry 150 watts peak. That's a little on the teensy side. It's not very long, but you know, I think I would have stepped it up to maybe a 14 gauge, at least a 16 gauge. I don't think that's a 20. Anyway, this thing wasn't really made to take apart. It's got these solder-in solid wire bridge cables here. These aren't the nice things like you might be familiar with inside of a computer. It's got a little broad one here that goes up to this front panel, and this just collects. It's all soldered in, so you can't pull it apart. And this, basically, all this does is collect the volume pots and the jacks on the front, input and headphones, and connects them down to the amplifiers and the shaping stuff that's down here in the back. But I'm glad enough it has enough slack I can move it out of the way. And this thing is built like a tank. This front plate is actually a casting. It's not no mamby-pamby plastic. This thing is made in China, but obviously it was a fairly high spec. The sheet metal parts is this back panel and the bottom plate, wherever it got off to, and it goes in here. That will actually, yeah, there, is actually sheet metal too. And the whole thing is held together by very few screws. Got a thermal pads, goes on the switcher and the Class D amp, and a couple little funky brackets. This puts pressure on that little board over there to hold the amplifier up against the heatsink in kind of a precarious way, but I guess it works since they don't really develop all that much heat. You roll the bottom up here, and there's the plus minus 25 regulators hiding on the bottom there. And it's a pretty neat and well made and well soldered together piece. If my phone will focus, it's a fairly nicely done piece overall. But the power supply has a problem in this one, where it comes on and within, a fraction of a second shuts itself back down. So I think I've troubleshot that problem, and I'm going to fix it. And for the life of me, I really can't figure out what the failure mode was. It's very strange. But I'm going to fix the power supply and fire it up and see if I can find anything else wrong with it. I have no clue yet whether it has any other issues, the 25 regulators work. I don't really know because it won't stay on long enough. And all this stuff over in here, I don't really know if that works. So we shall see.